Okay.
Okay. Hey there. Oh my God.
Hi, Lori.
I'm with Naomi Shihab Nye. It looks like you're in a storefront or some sort of magical womb where things are
Workshop.
happening.
It's I'm in a little treasure cave of my life. Just books and
Yeah.
things, toys and
Color. Yeah.
journals and ironing and a
Yeah.
light made by my friend Bill Simons and
Yeah.
posters, and everything is always kind of shifting and changing.
Great. It's so great.
Yeah, it's one of my mom's paintings on the floor over there. We're doing a little documentary booklet of paintings of her lifetime. And so I took it off the wall and I haven't put it up yet. But no, this is a place where I work morning, noon, and night, early before the sunlight. I love this little room. Yeah.
I love it too. I love it too. And I really want to thank you for being here. We were just saying before we got on that I've been tracking you for years and and this is our time together. And it's really just, it's 20, 25 minutes. We said we were just going to be simple and direct and we could talk for hours, but really I'm interested in a few things. So I just am grateful for your time. So, what I'm really interested in, I'm interested in where poems come from. I'm interested in how we make something from nothing, imagination in action, how we make such beauty from nothing. And so, you're going to start by reading a poem to us. And I thought we'd start there, read the poem to us, and then we're going to talk about where it came from. And we'll just get going from there. So thank you.
Well, Lori, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and your friends. And thank you for asking me to read Valentine for Earnest Men, because I did have a nice little story connecting to this poem that only happened within the past week. And I'll tell you that after I read the poem.
Crazy.
Valentine for Earnest Man, and that's spelled M-A-N-N. It was a person's name. You can't order a poem like you order a taco. Walk up to the counter, say, "I'll take 2," and expect it to be handed back to you on a shiny plate. Still, I like your spirit. Anyone who says, "Here's my address, write me a poem," deserves something in reply. So I'll tell a secret instead. Poems hide. In the bottoms of our shoes, they are sleeping. They are the shadows drifting across our ceilings the moment before we wake up. What we have to do is live in a way that lets us find them. Once I knew a man who gave his wife 2 skunks for a Valentine. He couldn't understand why she was crying. I thought they had such beautiful eyes. And he was serious. He was a serious man who lived in a serious way. Nothing was ugly just because the world said so. He really liked those skunks. So he reinvented them as Valentines, and they became beautiful, at least to him. And the poems that had been hiding in the eyes of skunks for centuries crawled out and curled up at his feet. Maybe if we reinvent whatever our lives give us, we find poems. Check your garage, the odd sock in your drawer, the person you almost like, but not quite. And let me know. Well, you are so dear. And what happened with just this past week was a man I thought I'd never seen before came up to me at an outdoor venue. And even that feels exotic right now after COVID, to be at an outdoor venue and to have someone walk up to you and talk to you. And he said, "Oh, it's you. I've just been looking for that skunk poem of yours because my ex-girlfriend told me she is planning to get some baby skunks to be her pets. And I remembered you coming to my classroom when I was a child and reading that poem And I loved it. And I felt that you liked the skunks or respected the skunks. And so I went digging around to find the poem, and I found it on the internet, and I gave it to my ex-girlfriend. And here you are standing in this outdoor restaurant that I now own, this man owns. And I said, wow, this is a crazy story. And he said something like, I just loved that poem when I was a kid. And that meant a lot to me, that he would even remember it. And, you know, reading it before we got on today, Lori, I was thinking about, you know, process, what you're interested in, and how as poets, we're definitely walking around and living all the time with these like little radar beams. We don't even do anything. They're just like, they're coming out from us. They're listening, they're watching, they're observing, they're collecting. And at all times, I think a poet or any kind of artist is in a state of gathering. We're always gathering. So, you know, every morning when I first get up, and at night before I go to bed, I write in whatever journal I'm writing in at the moment. And oftentimes it's something out of that day or out of the past 24 hours, or something that's come into my mind recently that I want to just write down. And so in the case of this poem, you know, it was definitely triggered by this encounter with Ernest Mann, this young African-American boy in a middle school. He was very tall, probably an 8th grader, who came up to me, and I didn't recognize him. He wasn't in any of the classes I'd seen, but he was sort of searching for, where's this poet in our school? And he asked me first, are you the poet? And I said, well, I'm one of the many. Who are you? And he said, I'm Ernest Mann. And I was just wondering if I gave you my address, could you write me a poem? And I thought, well, that's so endearing. That's what he thinks I'm doing in his school. Like, I'm just writing poems for people. And I said, well, I'll take your address, but I don't know. Or I may have said something like, I wish you were in one of my workshops, but you're not. So we had a little bit of a conversation. And then he walked off looking so hopeful. And he said, no, I'm not in one of the workshops. It's not, I wasn't invited. And then it struck me as I was walking into the next workshop, it's Valentine's Day. How often does somebody ask you for something on Valentine's Day that you could actually deliver? Like, this is someone kind of asking for something written to him. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to do it. I didn't know what it would be. And I worked the rest of the day and went home. And, you know, looking at the poem now, I definitely know that I was reaching back into maybe the week or 2 weeks prior, when I had heard this skunk story from 2 very dear friends of mine. And the man was telling the story. He was looking for a kind of witness, I think, someone to say, well, I think that was a nice Valentine, which I think I did say. His wife was not enthusiastic about this, though. And he was saying, well, you know, you're an animal lover. I thought you would like this. And she was saying, but it was kind of an insult that you would give me skunks. You don't even see that. And so I was just the witness to these 2 beloved people having this conversation, you know, trying to keep them both calm and steady. And I was touched by it because I thought it was kind of an endearing Valentine on his part. And so at the moment of Ernest asking me for a poem, I had no idea that I would mention these skunks to him. But when I sat down to write, the first thing that came to mind was this line about, you know, well, that was kind of weird just to walk up to someone and say, write a poem for me. And probably we'd had tacos for lunch at his school that day, is what I would guess. And so that idea that it's not that kind of an exchange might have come from the day itself, but also my attraction to him. I like your spirit. I mean, that came in, you know, I noticed him. I wanted him to be in a class. And then like, okay, what can I give him that might be useful to him? I don't want him to think that I have poems and he doesn't. And so right away, I'm telling him the secret. you know, we're here to find your poems. You don't need my poem. We need your poems. And that idea that, you know, we live in a way that lets us find what has just drifted across our ceilings. I'm pretty sure I had not thought of that ever in my life until the moment I started writing the poem. So now, like one of my mentors, I'll hold this picture up. This sits in front of me. This is a picture of William Stafford on his couch in the morning. He would do early morning writing every day, and he would scribble down things very freely that had happened within the past 24 hours or occurred to him. So he's been, you know, my mentor since I was like 18 years old and I started reading his poems. And he felt that as writers, we open the door, that many things come to us to be written simply because we've opened the door. We're not saying we have more potential than anyone else, more talent, more interesting things happen to us. We're not saying any of those things. We're just opening the door. And because we start out writing, something is available, given to us to come through whatever tool we're writing with. So here came The Man and the Skunks. And I remember feeling almost gratified, like, now I'm going to honor the skunks. He was trying to honor the skunks. Now I'm going to honor the skunks and give this to Ernest. And I liked what it did at the end of that stanza. I remember feeling surprised by, and the poems that had been hiding, eyes of skunks for centuries crawled out and curled up at his feet. To me, that was something I hadn't thought about, other than the man had mentioned, you know, they had such beautiful eyes. He had mentioned that as being, you know, one of the things that attracted him to the skunks. And he knew his wife appreciated beauty. But that idea that the skunks were carrying something, you know, we don't get to look into the eyes of a skunk very often because we have a regular one in our yard here in Texas, because we don't want to get that close to it. So I've never looked straight into the skunk's eyes. But I loved that image popping out, you know, that even the things that we steer clear of for whatever reason, you know, pain. We don't want pain in our lives, but we're all going to have it. And there is some beauty in those close eyes of pain, because pain makes us more sensitive and makes us more aware of not having pain, for one thing. So, you know, these surprises that occur on the path of writing, you're using very simple, factual material, the tacos, the boy, the shoes by the bed, the skunks, the real story. And then suddenly, I know William Stafford used to call it like a poetic blur or a leap at the end of a poem, where you widen out your lens, widen out the focus.
You say something.
So, yeah, something gets a little larger. You're very specific, but then it grows, it opens up. So maybe if we reinvent, sort of, I feel like it's sort of like the poem is figuring this out. I mean, it's a very simple poem. I'm not trying to make it more elaborate or fantastic.
No, but it was right there. The question was right there.
Maybe if we reinvent, like maybe it doesn't just have to be skunks or something, you know, unexpected and odd like that. It can be whatever we have right next to us. The old junky beat up garage stuffed with bits and pieces of things, or the odd remnant of socks, or bits or broken pencils or whatever we have. And then I do have something particular to say about the person you almost like, but not quite. And let me know. There was someone, very specific someone, that had shown up in my journal maybe 2-3 times in the past month. And I was really grappling with why I had such a personal, I wouldn't call it an aversion really, but just I had problems with this person. And it was someone very close, like living nearby me. And and so I was trying to figure out, you know, how can I change? How can I look at this in a more open-minded way. It's not my responsibility. I don't have to change anybody. It doesn't matter how much I like her or not. That doesn't matter. Just to find a way to be in the world together when something is, you know, frequently causing friction.
Right.
And so the person you almost like should have liked more,
right,
but found it really hard to, but not quite. Just to admit that in this poem, Lori, eased it forever.
Fascinating.
I never felt any problem around her again.
So interesting.
Just to acknowledge it.
Right.
For myself. It was like I'm making a confession to myself that even though I'm an adult person who tries to, you know, like everybody and be nice equally to everybody, sometimes it's hard. And so by admitting it in a phrase, the person you almost like, but not quite, I was relieved of that. And I could like her differently and not feel judgmental, not feel responsible, you know, not feel guilty, not anything, just enjoy her company or not. But, you know, that was interesting to me because it was like the boomerang of the poem is it gave a gift back to me. And then the last line, and let me know, because I really wanted to hear from Ernest. I mean, I would have liked to hear what caused him to come up to me that way and, you know, seek me out, and why did he feel he needed a poem? You know, I wanted to know him better. And I looked for him when I was back at the school and couldn't find him again. But it was so important to me just leave that door open to him. And what I remember is I really wanted, this sounds goofy now, I wanted to mail this on Valentine's Day. So the whole circle of the poem would happen within that one compact day. You know, here's Valentine's Day, a person asks for Valentine, you write Valentine, and you send Valentine. So I got on my bicycle right before sundown and rode to the post office so that I could mail it in that interior box that had more pickups, you know, than any street mailbox in those days. So I wanted it all to happen within one day. And then I really thought of it as a poem that I would not be sharing with anyone but Ernest. It was only for Ernest. I mean, I had no thought that I would publish the poem ever, but this is what happened. And I think this is one of those surprises. You know, I never heard back from Ernest. He never wrote me back. I put a return address on the envelope, but never heard back. That's okay. That's fine.
He was a kid. He was a kid.
He was a kid. Yeah, it was a momentary impulse. And he probably got the poem and thought,
what is this?
What is this?
What does this mean?
But yeah, he probably just threw it right away. And I remember handwriting it. I didn't want to type it. I wanted it to be really neatly.
Oh my God, I love this.
The way one of his poems would have looked had he given, you know, if he had given a poem to me in class in those days, it would always have been handwritten. But about 3 days later, I was doing one of those Saturday in-service workshops for teachers. And one of the wise guy teachers asked me at the very end of our session, so read us the most recent poem you've sent out that isn't published or anything yet, but you sent it out. And so I thought, did I send anything out this week? Well, I sent that poem to Ernest. So I said, well, let me go back. I went in my journal, which I always had with me at teacher workshops. And I said, okay, I sent this out to a kid who requested it. And I read it to them, and they kind of just got all over it and wanted it for their Texas Teachers Journal, English Journal or something, right on the spot. I mean, they made me hang around and hand copy it and give it to them. And so then it was published in that Texas Journal, you know, like, here's a recent poem by Naomi that she sent to a student. And then it sneaked into a book, and then it had its own life, and it was a poem that people liked. So that was very sweet. And then I heard back from, you know, more people than I could ever mention about, you know, different lines of it, speaking to them in different ways. And I keep right here next to me on my wall, I should show you this, you can't see it there. A student sent me this really beautiful artwork she did of two skunks and tacos. It's got everything. It's got the heart, Valentine's Day, the skunks, the tacos. I just love this.
Wow.
Right here. But
wow.
That feeling that we're, and she also typed, or she put the first line of the poem, you can't order a poem like you order a taco, in the middle of the artwork. But
wow.
You know, poems have lives that are unpredictable. We can never know what a poem's going to do if we let it go out into the world. And I think that's a beautiful thing about poems. You know, they're not ours. They're just entities that befriend us.
You collected, you assembled, and you let it go. I love, you have said so much, you know, I mean, we could just end right here, and I think that people would be sitting with everything you just shared. Thank you so much. And I know our time is limited, so I'm just going to pick out a line or two that I think is important to me. When I love your idea of the collecting, I think, and the antennas and the way we want to live, because I think there's a kind of fantasy sometimes that we need to be a certain way, or a certain kind of makeup or intelligence or qualification for that. And I want to dispel all of that, you know.
Yeah, good.
I want us to know that we're always in the midst of something beautiful and useful. And even if it just ends up in a journal and it doesn't even go out, it's useful. It's the paying attention, you know. And the line you have in there, we need to live in the way. And I think that's the thing that maybe is the most crucial to me in this moment, which is that, you know, we have a very distracted world, and there's a lot pulling at us, and a lot of distraction that doesn't necessarily take us to that sort of rich, sourceful, mulchy, creative place where things are kind of, you know, perking up and electric in a way. What would you say in terms of living in the way? Is there a kind of just practice you would share, or how do you live in the way, so that when we're done with this interview and you're going to go do what you're going to do, and I'm not suggesting that you walk around as the poet all the time, but you are primed probably for a kind of attention, and that's what I'd love to just hear you say.
Well, the way you describe it, Lori, is so beautiful. You know, everybody has the challenge of distraction and muchness and responsibility, and you know, just a lot going on at all times. I have banned the word busy from vocabulary maybe 25 years ago, and that's really helped me, because, you know, even if you have a very full, what
did you say you did with it?
I banned it. I banned the word.
You banned the word.
Like, if anyone ever says to me, I know you're really busy, but I say, no, I'm not. What do you need? You know, but definitely there's a fullness of days. And so each thing is still one thing when you do it. And I don't think the word busy is here to help any of us. It just makes you feel
crazy.
You're living in a swirl all the time. And that's a terrible feeling of distraction, as you said it. So to just think of one thing, then one thing, then one thing. You know, I'd like to say that I'm a very regular meditator, but I'm more the kind of meditator who walks along and does the dishes, and, you know, works in the yard and takes care of the cat and my mom and my grandson and all these people, with a certain attitude of service or attention or care. And I think I try to meditate while doing all these things. Sometimes I try a tactic that I used to do as a child, which is where you try to stand far back from your own life and look at it, like just as if you're in the wall over there at the corner, almost like a motion detector, my grandson would say, because he loves watching motion detectors and little cameras everywhere. Like you're watching your own life unfold. And are you being attentive in the moments of how you're doing everything? I mean, just standing back sometimes to look at what you're doing can feel helpful in terms of paying attention. I love that word in Japanese, yutori, which is life space. And a girl told me the last time I was in Japan working that she loved poems because they gave her a richer sense of life space, like you have a space around what you're thinking. And we'd been talking in her classes about, I would put on every board, I was obsessed with this at that moment, you are living in a poem. I wanted these kids to be thinking, I don't have to go out there, I don't have to go take a hike in the country, I don't have to, I am living in a poem every day, right here in Yokohama or Tokyo. I am in a poem. And you know, what I select from all this that I'm gathering, the possible material of the poem, that's up to me. But I'm in it. And so this girl said, well, when you write a poem, when you select anything and put it on the page in any kind of connectedness, then it's like you're able to stand in a space around it and look at the elements of your life. Almost as if your movement is framed by this stillness, this viewing. And I think that poetry does that for us, even when we read someone else's poem, that suddenly we're catapulted into calm. You know, it's as if, and then calm. Just that we're holding this note, holding a note of vision or possibility or perspective, you know, something that was close to us all the time, that was close to the poet when they were writing that poem. And we may translate it a little differently than the poet intended it. And I think that's fine. And we may, you know, interpret something in a way that was never the poet's intention. And I think that's fine. But so much of it depends on who we are, where we are, how we're feeling. You know, I think because I grew up with a strong awareness of poetry in all my days when I was a child too, it always felt like it was part of my days. But for someone who has never thought that about their days, I have trouble even imagining what a breathtaking experience that might be. I mean, I did get an email from a boy in Japan a few years, just recently during COVID year, saying, you know, you came to my class a few years ago, I was in this high school, and you wrote that on the board, and I copied it in my notebook, and I thought, no, I am not living in a poem. But today, I want to tell you, I understand it, and I do think I am, and we all are. And the fact that he would even reach out to me, that he would search me, find me, because he sent the email through kind of a remote, intricate web of emailing, was so touching to me. That this line has stayed with him, and he just sees it differently. And so the two movements of process being gathering, giving yourself that quiet time to gather, whether it's William Stafford at 4:30 in the morning or you at 4 in the afternoon, or anybody at any time they prefer. Doesn't have to be a full hour. I always like to mention that because I think many people deny themselves the possibility of writing in their little journal because they think, well, I don't have a full hour. If you have 7 minutes, you can write a lot. So just little snippets, bits and pieces, increments, tiny increments, I like to think about, of time that will help you gather. And, you know, right now I'm in a gathering phase for a poem I'm working on about taking a 5-year-old to a museum he's never been to before. And he loved it so much. He was just overwhelmed with love. He was riveted by so many aspects of it I wouldn't even have thought about. So I don't want to undercut that experience, which was to me like a triumphal experience. I'm writing down just everything I can think of, his quotes, other people we passed, random things that were said outside before we even got into the museum, things afterwards, paintings we looked at, you know, so I'm just gathering, and then we'll see what kind of turns into the poem.
Wow.
But I think we should be generous in that gathering phase with ourselves.
Right.
Let us embrace like a lot of the experience, even more than we might choose to use. That's fine.
Because we don't know until we sort of walk into it and sort of touch it, what it's going to do for us and what it's going to light up.
And what else might connect to it.
I just had this fantasy that maybe what you'd end up writing is actually like a novella or a small book that just has all these passages of that experience, because there was so much. And this is a big journey.
Well, that's sweet of you to say. I do feel like it's going to be a poem with parts. Two parts to it, like where a poem has numbers 1, 2, 3.
Oh, I love that.
You're moving into the different rooms of the museum, and then you're returning. That became a big part of our experience that day, which was interesting to me, because I wouldn't have necessarily thought a 5-year-old would want to walk the entire museum to go back to see that little video or that painting again. Or, it was interesting too that he was so tuned in to the video art, which I think as an older person, I'm less tuned into.
Right.
But his attraction to it made me stand with it a lot longer than I might have otherwise, and notice so many things about it.
Yeah.
So,
wow, it's beautiful. Wow. Well, I'm going to call our time because you've been very generous. Thank you. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving us so much to bring in, and also the gathering and the living in the poem is such a beautiful way to honor our experiences, no matter what, without judgment, just honoring. And I think that, part of the richness of living in this way is that sort of that little bit of step back, like, oh, here we are, the tiniest moments.
Yeah, beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with writing a little more than you might end up using. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody needs to be shy about doing that. Feel free, and you can always select and cut things out later. Lori, thank you for your generosity.
Such a sweet woman. Thank you so much. So generous. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.